Hello, everyone. So, I'm going to do a discussion of two more sonnets today, simply because I really like these sonnets. Um, if you take the Poetic Forms class with me, I don't know when that will be offered, but we will definitely be covering these two in that class. I think they're really good examples of how dynamic the sonnet is. And then later today, hopefully, I will upload some more videos about other poetic forms in English. I obviously cannot cover them all, but I'm going to kind of go through the greatest hits, just so you're familiar with how those function. So this first poem is called Ozymandius, and it's by the Romantic poet Percy Bysshe Shelley. I think I've mentioned Shelley before. He died, I believe, when he was 28. I want to say 29. In a boating accident. There was a storm. He was out in a rowboat with his friend, and a storm came along and drowned them both. But in his short lifetime, he wrote some of the most famous poems in the English tradition, this being one of them. So he publishes this in 1818 when he was just 26 years old. No pressure. And just for reference, Ozymandias is a Greek name for the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses or Ramesses II. And I'm going to read through it, and then we're going to look at some of the aspects of this poem. It's one of the weirdest sonnets ever written. First of all, for how good it is, and yet for how it really just modifies the sonnet form itself. Um, so let's look at this poem. Ozymandias. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." All right. So one thing, just to give you this central image, okay? Um, the central image is that we've got this guy, right, who meets a traveler from an antique land, okay? Somebody who has traveled the world. And he is telling the speaker, okay, that on his journeys out there, wherever, I am not going to attempt to draw a horse or camel. We'll just pretend that he's walking the whole way, okay? And the idea is this, that as he's walking around, he sees this giant sculpture, right, of Ozymandias sunken in the sands. Around this time, when Shelley was writing this, there was a gigantic resurgence of interest in the antique world, and specifically with Egypt. A lot of that actually had to do with Napoleon. We found the Rosetta Stone at this time. Napoleon was out, trying to conquer the world, and in doing so, he brought a lot of, unfortunately through conflict, through war, he brought a lot of kind of cultural attention to various things, and as Egypt seems to have been the primary recipient of this attention, and so this is kind of part of that craze. I mean, just to give you a sense of this, people in Europe were buying mummies, and specifically for powdering them. So they would crush up these mummies and then put them in their food and wine and drinks for God knows why. I don't know what on earth would compel somebody to do that, but just to give you a sense of how this craze was sweeping everybody. So this traveler is telling this story. Okay, he sees this um, visage here, and on the pedestal, right, those words appear: "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings." So this is an old statue that has been obviously neglected for a very long time. If you're interested in this at all, you can go look at old photos of the Sphinx in where they found it. And it used to be pretty much like this, buried up to its face. Like it didn't look when they first found it like it does now. It wasn't curated in any sense. So, what is interesting about this poem? Well, first of all, if we look at it and we analyze the rhyme scheme, what we're seeing is a very irregular rhyme. Okay, Shelley is not applying either the English or Italian sonnet form to this, and that irregularity, right, might also be something that we can read um, toward the poem's overall meaning. Now, I don't want to be too pedantic about this with you because there are many, many readings we can take of any poem. Okay. I don't want you to think that every poem has this kind of checklist of, oh, okay, it means this, this, and this. A, B, C. No. There are many, many things and themes that we can look at. The theme that I'm looking at for this poem specifically, just to give you a sense of what the poem might be doing, among many different things, that theme is the ephemeral, right? Or the ephemerality of even art, human life, existence, human culture, all of these things that we place a lot of importance on for very good reasons, is in fact ephemeral. And I think the next poem that we're going to look at really hones in on this, but from a very different kind of perspective. So we have a rhyme scheme going A, B, and that B is a near rhyme, so stone and frown, right, don't rhyme perfectly, they are near rhymes. Then it goes A, C, D, C, E, D, E, F, E, F. And those two E rhymes there, appear, despair, and bear, those are, once again, near rhymes. Now, if we go through this line by line, okay, we're just going to kind of analyze, like, what exactly is he saying? I met this guy from an antique land who said, and then here we have this quote, okay? Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. We're getting this this image, right, of these 2 feet. Half near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage, a face lies. So this was once this grand, mighty statue that is now broken up. You can go look at it's in Rome. I believe, I want to say it's Constantine, but I might be mistaken on this. There's a gigantic statue of one of the rulers of Rome. I want to say Constantine, and it's massive. I mean, in terms of scale, if this were the face, an average person would be about that big. It's massive, right? So you can go kind of see these grand sculptures, the way that people used to build these things. So now on this face, we see that there's a frown, a wrinkled lip, a sneer of cold command, right? This is a king. This is the pharaoh, right? And these features tell us or demonstrate to us that the sculptor, the artist who created them, very well understood, okay, these human passions, right? He has replicated in his sculpture, right, a very accurate rendition of the characteristics, let us say, of Ramses or Ozymandias. They yet survive, okay? The art, in a way, is both permanent and non-permanent, right? Because we still have this piece of sculpture here lying in the sand, and yet, time will inexorably wear all things down. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, right? These two, the hand here being the sculptor's hand in a way, and then the heart. Now, this is where the poem kind of opens up a little bit for interpretation, because is Shelley talking about Ozymandius, or is he talking about the sculptor? It's a little bit unclear, and I think that ambiguity is something we can kind of have some fun with. I tend to read it as the sculptor. I have seen other people read it as Ozymandius, but in either case, we still get the same sentiment. And on the pedestal these words appear: my name is Ozymandius, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains, right? And then we have this wonderful image: round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretched far away. So, a couple things to notice about this poem structurally. And also, I don't know why, I can't, for some reason, get rid of this highlighting on Ozymandius. I did not intend for that. I just copied and pasted this off the internet. Notice this. This is all one sentence. Okay? All one sentence. Now, he does have some semicolons. You can see here the worst punctuation mark of all. Here he has a dash to set off the man talking. Okay? And this is all basically being told to us. So the punctuation here becomes quite important. Okay? So this other man is the one basically becoming the speaker, right? Through his travels, he is far more interesting than our embedded speaker here. This is the second sentence. Nothing beside remains. And then here's our third sentence. Round the decay of that colossal wreck. So there are three sentences. This is why this is such a weird poem, right? Because he has stacked a lot of the information in this first sentence and then basically undoes it with this very, very short, very curt sentence thereafter, and then lets this next sentence kind of wander. And if you read this out loud, okay, round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare. Now listen to that last line. It's almost like these piles of wreckage, that "k" sound, the decay, colossal, boundless, and bare. These consonants have a kind of harder tone or a harder strike, you might say. It's almost like Shelley is trying to replicate the idea of looking at these pieces of stone of the sculpture, and then almost like a panning shot in a movie, almost like like a panning shot would be where we're looking at this, and then the camera moves, okay, so that X, kind of eventually goes out of the picture. It's almost like the pan shot where he's looking from these things out, right? And then, why are you doing that? And then to the sand behind them. The lone and level sand stretched far away. So that's one way of even reading sound effects in a poem, okay? Now, is that true? Well, no, it's an interpretation. Interpretations are never true, false, right? But I think we can try to glean some interesting meaning from even the use of sound effects here. So what is this poem about? What's its meaning? Well, like I said, there are many things. This idea of the ephemeral, right? That which does not last long. Kind of like human beings, we don't stick around very long. Our great works of art, right, don't stick around very long. Even the work of the mighty, the King of Kings, doesn't stick around very long. In cosmological terms or cosmic scales, our planet, right, will eventually freeze over in about, I think it's 7 billion years. It's called the heat death of the universe. Our sun will eventually turn into a white dwarf. And in that time, it's not going to be very good to be on this planet. It's going to be, just to kind of show you this, I think it's interesting. As our sun goes through its death cycles, right? Now remember, our sun is about the volume-wise, we could fit about 1 million Earths inside of it. And we have Mercury, we have Venus, and then we have Earth. When our sun goes through its death throes, it will eventually become what's called a red giant. And basically, it balloons out. And it may balloon out so far that it will actually engulf the Earth. Now, don't worry, this is several billion years off in the future. But even our nice little planet, right, will eventually be swallowed up by our own sun. And then the sun will collapse into a white dwarf. So, back to the poem before we get too depressed here, right? Now, this is what we call a frame story, okay? This is called a frame poem or a frame narrative because we have one speaker and then we have two speakers. So we have a story within the story, okay? You probably have heard in other classes people talking about frame stories, right? What this does is it allows the author to set up potential levels of irony typically. It's where a lot of structural irony comes from. And so I think that in a way, Shelley is structuring this to create that structural irony, right? Because this poem being about art and how art does kind of stick around, but not, right? So too, right, we have these layers of the story, right? We have the speaker himself becoming, right, the secondary in his own tale, okay? So I think that there is some evidence for structural irony going on in here. Now remember that we have the speaker, we have all the characters. Let's look at characters. We have the speaker, the traveler. Well, we also have the sculptor, right? Even though he's long dead. We have Ozymandius. Now also this, I think this is kind of interesting. It's almost as if the speaker, in retelling this story of something that he encountered, be it real or not, it almost implies us in the story. It almost kind of points a finger at us, right? As if to say, hey, this is relevant to you too. Now, perhaps that idea of the telling, of the speaking, the creating, art, right, are both forms of immortality and representative of the ephemerality, right? Because all he's doing is telling the story, he's not writing it down. It's this speaker who's writing it down. So the speaker, by writing it down, is participating in the very same creation, right, that the sculptor did when he sculpted this visage of Ozymandias. So we get that dual kind of ironic level. It's immortal and ephemeral simultaneously. Okay, this is an old theme. It's a very old theme. You'll see it a lot in Shakespeare's sonnets. He uses that as a trope many, many times. So long as this poem survives, so too will our love, even though it's not quite true. It's true and not true. This is the paradox and ambiguity that we find in a lot of literature that explores this theme. Now, why did I call attention to the rhyme scheme earlier? If we look at it, right, it's very irregular. It's almost wandering, okay? It's haphazard. It's almost like it resists that attempt to place order, right, on the things around us. I mean, human beings, we have an intense proclivity to place order around us. Clean the house, to mow the yard, this sort of cultivation of nature. That's where agriculture comes from, right? This is a very old um, human inclination. What it does is it allows human beings to start to predict things, right? We look to the sky, we look to the stars, right? And we were able to, very, very, very long ago, start to notice patterns. And once we start to notice patterns, we can start to predict things, right? Right. In Egypt, they had that annual flooding of the Nile, right? And they had to develop an astronomical system that allowed them to predict with regularity over time, and we're talking thousands of years, with regularity when the Nile would flood, because that meant, okay, time to start planting once it's done. Okay. So this idea of this meandering rhyme scheme, this kind of chaotic rhyme scheme, it's almost like the rhyme scheme itself in comparison to an English or Italian sonnet has been broken. So here are the pieces of, right, what was once this whole and complete work of art, right? So Shelley, even in the rhyme scheme, I think is kind of replicating this, but also he's starting to get these other themes built in. And this is what I mean. Like, once you stop and really kind of bite down on a poem, and when you know what that poem is seeking to do, you will start to notice these things, these patterns. Okay. Now, the easiest irony of this poem comes right here, right? Ozymandias's proclamation, "I am the King of Kings. All you other kings, all you other mighty folk, look on what I have done and despair because you can clearly not do as much as me. Ha ha ha." Well, what's the irony there? Is that we find this broken statue lying all around the sand. And those are his passions, right? That's what that's what Shelley's talking about there. Now, we said that a sonnet has to have a volta. Now, clearly, this is not going to come after that first octave, right? Those first 8 lines. I would actually argue, and I typically do, that the volta comes right here. Nothing beside remains. This sentence is so short. It's almost like this short declaration that, well, good luck, right? Good luck thinking what you're thinking, Ozymandias. And so this hyperbole of Ozymandias's proclamation being undercut by this very brief, very just clipped sentence, right? I think is what makes that the volta. The eternal, for example, is the only ephemeral, even written in stone, and we can reverse that, right? The ephemeral becomes eternal in a sense, okay? These two themes working on one another. Now, after that volta, it's almost like our speaker, the I, disappears as well, right? It's not like, and then he said, and then I said to him, well, what else did you see? It's almost like the speaker, just like Ozymandias, just like us, just like art, disappears. Okay, and then we have that, like I discussed earlier, that very, very bleak image, that very bleak scene that we're given here. When we compare, once again, this heavily loaded sentence, all these details, okay? All the details that we read in art, in the sculpture here, blah, 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 is then undone. And it's undone in a very brief, like, knockout punch kind of line. And then the only image we get in this is the sands, okay? Now, he's not really describing the colossal wreck. He's saying the sands are the things boundless and bare that stretch far away around the decay, right? So he's giving this kind of panoramic view. And I think that this is a very, very interesting poem. And we can read into it. Once we take a theme, right? Shelley is trying to explore, or the speaker is trying to explore, the interrelations and paradoxical nature of human beings' desire to create and build, and time's ability to undo all of those things that we take to be important. So, I don't want this video to go on too long.